The great council chamber buzzed with voices from across the galaxy. Representatives from dozens of worlds sat in their assigned sections, their strange forms creating shadows on the polished floor. Some had wings, others had tentacles, and many had shapes that would frighten any human who saw them. But today they all shared the same feeling of dread. Admiral Kextar walked into the center of the room with confidence that made others step back. His four eyes gleamed like cut diamonds, and his silver uniform bore the marks of 17 conquered worlds. The Zephyrian Empire had not lost a single battle in over 200 years. His tall, insect-like body moved with the grace of a predator who had never known defeat. "Honored council members," Kextar began, his voice carrying easily through the vast chamber. "I stand before you today to announce our next expansion. The Sol system will join our empire within one standard rotation." Murmurs filled the room. Some voices showed fear, others showed resignation. The Zephyrian Empire took what it wanted and no one had been able to stop them. "The species there calls themselves humans," Kextar continued, pulling up a hologram that showed Earth spinning slowly in the center of the room. "Our scouts report that they are young, primitive, and divided. They still fight among themselves, over resources and territory. Their technology is crude, their military scattered across multiple factions. Taking their system will require minimal effort." The Admiral's mandibles clicked in what his species considered laughter. These humans have only recently learned to travel between their own planets. They have no experience with galactic warfare. They possess no energy shields, no plasma weapons, no faster-than-light communication systems. Victory is assured. From the darkest corner of the chamber, a figure stirred. The other council members turned to look as Ambassador Velthos rose slowly from his seat. His body showed the scars of countless battles. Burns covered his carapace, and one of his arms had been replaced with a mechanical substitute. He had once been a proud warrior of the Andromedan Collective, but now he was the sole survivor of his people. "Admiral," Velthos said, his voice rough like gravel grinding together, "I request permission to speak." Kextar's eyes focused on the scarred ambassador. "Velthos of the fallen Andromedans, what wisdom does a defeated species offer to the victorious? The eye?" Insult hung in the air, but Velthos did not react with anger. Instead, his three good eyes showed something that made several council members uncomfortable. Fear. Not the simple fear of death or pain, but something deeper and more primal. "I must warn you, Admiral. My people once stood where you stand now. We looked at the humans and saw exactly what you see. Primitive technology, divided factions, limited military experience. We believed conquest would be simple." Velthos walked closer to the center of the chamber, his damaged leg making each step difficult. "We attacked their outer colonies first. Small settlements on distant worlds, barely defended. We expected immediate surrender. We expected them to beg for mercy or try to negotiate terms." The chamber grew quiet. Even Admiral Kextar stopped his casual movement and listened. "But they did not surrender," Velthos continued. "They did not negotiate. They did something that none of us had ever encountered in 3 centuries of conquest across 47 star systems." He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of terrible memory. "They got angry." Several council members shifted uncomfortably. Anger was a common response to invasion. Most species showed anger before accepting defeat. "No," Velthos said, seeing their expressions. "You do not understand. This was not the anger of the defeated. This was not rage at losing territory or resources. This was something else entirely. When we attacked their colonies, every human in their system learned about it within hours, and then something extraordinary happened." The ambassador's mechanical arm whirred as he gestured toward the spinning image of Earth. Their civilians volunteered for military service. Not thousands, but millions. Factory workers became soldiers. Teachers became pilots. Farmers became engineers. Children barely old enough to walk began learning to build weapons. But that was not the strangest part. Kextar's confidence wavered slightly. "What do you mean?" They began to smile. The words sent a chill through the chamber. Velthos continued, his voice growing quieter but somehow more terrifying. Our psychological experts studied the recordings from our attacks. When humans learned that an alien species was trying to destroy their colonies, they showed fear for perhaps an hour. Then the fear changed into something else. They began planning. They began building. They began preparing for war with an enthusiasm that horrified our commanders. The ambassador limped closer to Admiral Kextar, close enough that the Zephyrian could see the deep scars that covered his face. They turned everything into a weapon, Admiral. Civilian transport ships became missile platforms. Mining equipment became siege weapons. Medical facilities became military research centers. But the most disturbing thing was how they treated their own casualties. Casualties are normal in war, Kextar said, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. When one of our soldiers dies, his comrades mourn and continue fighting. When a human died defending their colony, the others would gather around the body. For exactly 30 seconds. They would say words that our translators could not properly convert, but the emotional content was clear. They were not mourning. They were making promises. Veltos touched one of his scars with his good hand. They promised the dead that their sacrifice would be remembered. They promised that their enemy would pay, and then they would fight with twice the fury they had shown before. The chamber was completely silent now. Even the usual rustling and breathing sounds had stopped. Admiral, in 300 years of conquest, my people had developed protocols for every possible enemy response. We knew how to handle desperate last stands. We understood negotiated surrenders. We could manage guerrilla warfare and civilian uprisings. But we had no protocol for an enemy that treated every battle as if the survival of their entire species depended on victory. Kextar's mandibles clicked nervously. Your people were defeated because you underestimated them. The Zephyrian Empire does not make such errors. Our technology is superior. Our numbers are greater. Our experience is vast. That is exactly what we believed, Veltos replied sadly. Our technology was indeed superior. Our weapons could destroy their ships with single shots. Our shields could absorb their most powerful attacks without damage. Our experience in galactic warfare was centuries old when their species was still learning to make fire. The ambassador paused and looked directly into Kextar's 4 eyes. None of that mattered. They learned to fight us by studying the wreckage of their own destroyed ships. They developed new tactics by watching their friends die. They created weapons from the twisted metal of their ruined colonies, and when we finally realized how dangerous they had become, it was too late to retreat. How did your mighty collective fall to such primitives? Kextar asked, though he no longer sounded mocking. They did not fight like soldiers, Admiral. Soldiers have limits. Soldiers follow rules. Soldiers can be discouraged by losses or impressed by superior force. Humans fought like parents protecting their children. And there is no force in the galaxy more dangerous than a parent who believes their child's life is threatened. Veltos turned to address the entire council, his damaged voice carrying to every corner of the chamber. Admiral Kextar, honored. Council members, I have spent the last 50 years studying warfare across the galaxy. I have seen the rise and fall of empires. I have witnessed the conquest of species that possess technology beyond imagination. But I have never seen anything like what happens when humans decide that their survival depends on victory. He looked back at the Zephyrian Admiral one final time. Do not attack the humans, Admiral. I beg you to reconsider. Your empire is vast and powerful, but you have never fought anything like them. They will turn your strengths into weaknesses. They will use your size against you. They will make your experience irrelevant by refusing to fight the kind of war you understand. The chamber remained quiet for long moments. Finally, Admiral Kextar straightened his uniform and clicked his mandibles in dismissal. Your warnings are noted, Ambassador. But the Zephyrian Empire has never retreated from conquest because of fear. Our fleet departs for the Sol system in 7 standard days. As the council session ended and representatives began filing out, Veltos remained, in his seat, staring at the slowly spinning image of Earth. A few council members approached him quietly. Do you really believe the humans are so dangerous? Asked the representative from Kepler Prime. Veltos did not look away from Earth as he answered, I hope the Admiral proves me wrong. But if he does not, Then in a few months, I will no longer be the only ambassador representing a dead species. The chamber lights dimmed, leaving only the soft blue glow of Earth turning slowly in the darkness, beautiful and peaceful and utterly unaware of the storm that was coming. Captain Jake Morrison had been hauling cargo between Earth and Mars for 12 years. He knew every asteroid, every shipping lane, and every fuel station between the two planets. His ship, the New Horizon, was not pretty or fast, but it was reliable. Just like Jake himself, he was drinking his morning coffee and checking the navigation systems when everything changed. The sensor array started beeping with an urgent tone that Jake had never heard before. His navigator, Lisa Park, looked up from her breakfast with confusion on her face. "Jake, you need to see this," Lisa said, her voice tight with worry. She was pointing at her screen, where dozens of red dots were appearing at the edge of their sensor range. Jake put down his coffee and walked over to look. The dots were huge, much bigger than any ship he had ever seen. They were moving in perfect formation toward the inner solar system, coming from deep space where nothing should exist. "Run a diagnostic on the sensors," Jake said. "These readings can't be right." Lisa's fingers moved quickly over her controls. "Diagnostics show everything is working perfectly. Jake, these contacts are real, and they're massive." Within an hour, every ship in the solar system was seeing the same thing. The mysterious fleet was enormous, with individual ships the size of small cities. They moved with purpose and precision that no human fleet could match. On Luna Station, Admiral Patricia Hayes stood in the command center watching the tactical display with growing concern. She had been in charge of the Sol Defense Force for 8 years, but nothing in her training had prepared her for this moment. "Ma'am, we're getting reports from every tracking station in the system," reported Lieutenant Ryan Cole from his communications console. "The unknown fleet consists of at least 400 vessels, possibly more. They're maintaining a steady course toward Earth." Admiral Hayes studied the display carefully. The alien ships were still 3 days away, but their size and numbers were already causing panic throughout the system. Emergency broadcasts were going out to all civilian vessels, warning them to stay clear of the approaching fleet. "Any response to our communication attempts?" Hayes asked. "Nothing yet, ma'am. We've tried every frequency we know, but they're not answering." Hayes nodded grimly. In her experience, visitors who refused to talk were usually not bringing good news. On the New Horizon, Jake and Lisa watched as military ships began moving into defensive positions. The human fleet looked impressive until you compared it to the approaching alien vessels. Even their largest battleships seemed tiny next to the unknown contacts. "Lisa, how long until they reach Earth?" Jake asked. "At their current speed, about 72 hours, she replied. "Jake, I'm scared. What do they want?" Before Jake could answer, every communication system in the solar system activated at once. The message came through clearly on every frequency, translated into perfect English. "Primitive species of the third planet, you will surrender your system immediately and without resistance. Any attempt to oppose our forces will result in the complete elimination of your population. You have 1 solar day to comply with this demand." The transmission ended as abruptly as it had begun, leaving only silence on all channels. Admiral Hayes felt her blood turn cold. In all her years of military service, she had never heard a more arrogant or threatening message. She turned to her communications officer with fire in her eyes. "Lieutenant Cole, open a channel to the alien fleet." "Yes, ma'am." "Channel open." Hayes stepped forward and spoke clearly into the microphone. "Unknown vessels. This is Admiral Patricia Hayes of the Sol Defense Force. We do not recognize your authority over this system. We decline your demand for surrender. If you wish to discuss peaceful relations, we are willing to talk. If you come here with hostile intent, you will find us ready to defend our homes." She gestured for Cole to close the channel, then turned to address her entire staff. "Send an emergency broadcast to every human vessel in the system, military and civilian. Tell them we're facing an invasion fleet and that every ship capable of fighting should prepare for battle. Tell them that surrender is not an option." Throughout the solar system, humans received the broadcast with a mixture of fear and determination. But something else began to happen. something that would have surprised Ambassador Velthos if he had been there to see it. On the cargo ship New Horizon, Jake Morrison looked at Lisa Park with a strange expression. It was not fear or despair. It was something much more dangerous. "Lisa, what's our cargo manifest?" She checked her computer screen. "Mining explosives for the asteroid belt operations. About 40 tons of high-grade charges." Jake smiled, and it was not a pleasant smile. Those explosives could do a lot of damage if they were delivered to the right place. "Jake, you're talking about using our ship as a weapon. That's suicide." "Maybe," Jake said quietly. "But I've got nieces and nephews on Earth. I've got friends on Mars. These aliens think they can just show up and demand we surrender our entire solar system." His voice grew harder. "They picked the wrong species to threaten. Similar conversations were taking place on ships throughout the system." Dr. Kevin Walsh, a biologist aboard the research vessel Darwin's Dream, was looking at his laboratory full of experimental chemicals. Captain Sarah Davis of the passenger liner Golden Gate was reading emergency protocols that had never been tested in real combat. Engineer Paul Brooks on the mining platform, Titan's Hammer, was calculating how much damage his industrial equipment could cause if modified for warfare. None of these people were soldiers. They were scientists, merchants, miners, and teachers. But they all shared something that the alien invaders had not expected to find in a primitive species. They were angry. On Mars, Colonel Maria Santos received Admiral Hayes's broadcast while she was inspecting the orbital defense platforms. These weapons had been built to destroy asteroids that threatened the planet, but Santos was already thinking about other uses for them. "Sergeant Williams," she called to her aide, "how many kinetic projectiles do we have in storage?" "About 2,000, ma'am. Each one capable of cracking a medium-sized asteroid." Santos nodded thoughtfully. "And how accurate are our targeting systems?" "Within 10 meters at maximum range, ma'am." "Good. Begin preparing all platforms for combat operations. If these aliens want to fight, we'll give them one they won't forget." Back on Luna Station, Admiral Hayes was receiving reports from across the system. What she heard would have amazed any military strategist in galactic history. "Ma'am, we're getting volunteering requests from civilian vessels throughout the system," Lieutenant Cole reported. "Cargo ships, research vessels, even passenger liners are asking for combat assignments." "How many?" Hayes asked. "Over 3,000 so far, and the number is growing every hour." Hayes stared at the tactical display where red enemy contacts moved steadily toward her blue defensive positions. She had expected to fight this battle with her military fleet of 60 ships. Now she was looking at an armada of volunteers that grew larger every hour. "Ma'am, there's something else," Cole continued. "The civilian captains are requesting permission to modify their ships for combat. They're asking for guidance on turning cargo holds into missile bays and mining equipment into weapons." For the first time since the crisis began, Admiral Hayes smiled. "Tell them they have permission to modify their vessels as they see fit, and send them our tactical database. If they're going to fight, they deserve every advantage we can give them." On the New Horizon, Jake Morrison was already making modifications to his ship's systems. Lisa Park worked beside him, her fear replaced by grim determination. "Jake, the navigation computer is programmed," she said. "One collision course locked and loaded." "Good. How about the explosive charges?" "Rigged for manual detonation. One button push and 40 tons of mining explosives go off at once." Jake nodded and looked out at the stars where the alien fleet approached. Somewhere out there, Admiral Kextar was probably expecting the humans to surrender or run away. He was about to learn that humans had a third option. "Lisa, record a message for me. I want to send it to every human ship in the system." She activated the recording system and nodded. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the cargo vessel New Horizon. I've got a hold full of explosives and a ship that can reach ramming speed. These aliens think we're primitive and weak. They think we'll surrender our homes without a fight. They're about to learn something that every human child knows. Nobody threatens our family and gets away with it." He paused and looked directly into the camera. "I don't know if we can win this battle. Our ships are smaller, our weapons are weaker, and we're outnumbered 10 to 1. But I know one thing for certain. When these aliens go home, they're going to remember the day they tried to conquer humanity. They're going to remember that we don't surrender, we don't retreat, and we sure as hell don't give up. The message was transmitted throughout the solar system, and within hours it was followed by thousands of similar recordings. Teachers and farmers, doctors and mechanics, all saying the same thing in different words. The aliens had made a terrible mistake. Admiral
Kickstar.
monitoring human communications from his flagship, listened to these messages with growing confusion. Where was the panic he had expected? Where were the desperate attempts at negotiation? Instead, he was hearing what sounded like preparation for war. Admiral Kekstar stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the tactical display with growing irritation. The human deadline had passed 12 hours ago, and instead of surrender, his sensors showed thousands of primitive vessels moving into attack formations. Tactical officer, report on enemy positions, he commanded. Sir, we count approximately 3,200 human vessels. Most appear to be civilian ships with improvised modifications. Their largest warships are less than 1/10 the size of our destroyers. Kekstar's mandibles clicked in what his species considered laughter. 3,000 primitive vessels against our fleet of 400 advanced warships. This will be over quickly. What Admiral Kekstar did not understand was that Captain Jake Morrison and thousands like him had spent the past day preparing for something that had never happened before in galactic warfare. They were not preparing to win a traditional battle. They were preparing to make the enemy remember why attacking humanity was a mistake. The first wave of human ships approached the alien fleet at maximum speed. Jake Morrison's New Horizon led a group of 40 cargo vessels, all loaded with mining explosives and flying straight toward the largest Zephyrian ships. Lisa, are you ready? Jake asked his navigator. Lisa Park looked pale but determined. Collision. Course locked in. 40 tons of explosives armed and ready. Jake, it's been an honor flying with you. Same here, Lisa. Remember, we're not dying today, we're buying time for everyone back home. The Zephyrian gunners opened fire when the human ships came within weapons range. Energy beams that could destroy asteroids struck the approaching cargo vessels. Several ships exploded immediately, their improvised armor no match for advanced alien weapons. But something unexpected happened. Instead of turning away from the devastating firepower, the surviving human ships accelerated directly toward the source of the attack. Jake Morrison watched his friends die around him, but he kept the New Horizon on course. When a Zephyrian beam weapon struck his port engine, he simply rerouted power to the remaining systems and maintained speed. Jake, we're losing structural integrity, Lisa called out as alarms filled the bridge. We just need to get close enough, Jake replied through gritted teeth. 10 more seconds. The New Horizon slammed into the side of a Zephyrian destroyer at full speed. The cargo ship's hull crumpled like paper, but 40 tons of mining explosives detonated exactly as planned. The massive alien vessel, built to withstand energy weapons and particle beams, had no defense against the raw kinetic force and chemical explosives of a desperate human suicide attack. The destroyer broke apart in a brilliant explosion that lit up the entire battle zone. Across the combat area, similar scenes played out. Dr. Kevin Walsh, in his research ship Darwin's Dream, had filled his specimen bays with every volatile chemical in his laboratory. His last transmission was heard throughout the human fleet. In nature, when you threaten a species with extinction, you trigger their survival instinct. Today, humanity shows you what survival looks like. His ship struck a Zephyrian cruiser and exploded with such force that the shockwave damaged 2 nearby enemy vessels. On the bridge of his flagship, Admiral Kekstar watched his tactical display with growing alarm. Red symbols representing his ships were disappearing at an impossible rate. Report, he demanded. Sir, we've lost 17 vessels in the first engagement. The humans are using kamikaze tactics. They're deliberately ramming our ships with their own vessels loaded with explosives. Impossible. No rational species would sacrifice so many ships and lives in hopeless attacks. Sir, our psychological warfare division has no protocols for this behavior. The humans appear to be treating every engagement as a fight to the death. Meanwhile, the human military was learning to coordinate with their civilian volunteers in ways that no military academy had ever taught. Commander Lisa Chen of the battleship Defiance watched cargo ships and passenger liners executing attack runs with deadly precision. Communications, patch me through to all civilian vessels, she ordered. Channel open, ma'am. This is Commander Chen to all volunteer ships. Your sacrifice is noted and honored. We're uploading new targeting data to help make your attacks more effective. Aim for the engine sections of the larger ships. Avoid the heavily armored bow sections. The response came from dozens of civilian captains at once. Captain Sarah Davis of the passenger liner Golden Gate spoke for all of them. Understood, Commander. We're not soldiers, but we know how to follow directions. And we know why we're here. What followed was unlike anything in recorded galactic warfare. Human civilian ships, crewed by teachers and farmers and shop owners, began executing complex attack patterns that military strategists would study for centuries. Engineer Paul Brooks, commanding the mining platform Titan's Hammer, had converted his industrial equipment into the largest improvised weapons platform in human space. His drilling lasers, designed to cut through solid rock, focused their combined power on a single Zephyrian battleship. All drilling arrays, concentrate fire on target Alpha, he commanded over the platform's communication system. His crew consisted of miners and engineers, but they worked their improvised weapons with the efficiency of veteran gunners. The concentrated industrial lasers burned through the alien ship's armor like it was paper. When the hull was breached, Brooks launched every mining charge his platform carried directly into the opening. The Zephyrian battleship exploded from the inside out. Admiral Kextar felt something he had never experienced in 2 centuries of conquest: doubt. His superior fleet was taking catastrophic losses from enemies who fought with no regard for their own survival. Sir, the human vessels are not following any recognizable tactical doctrine, his tactical officer reported. They appear to be improvising their strategies in real time. How can primitives without military experience improvise effective tactics? Sir, our analysis suggests they are not thinking like soldiers. They are thinking like parents protecting their children. The words sent a chill through the Zephyrian command staff. Every species they had conquered fought to preserve their military forces. These humans were fighting to preserve their families, and that made them infinitely more dangerous. Colonel Maria Santos on Mars had turned the planet's orbital defense platforms into long-range artillery. Her kinetic projectiles, originally designed to destroy asteroids, were now targeting Zephyrian ships with devastating accuracy. Target acquired, her gunner reported. Zephyrian heavy cruiser, range 4 million kilometers. Fire, Santos ordered. Kinetic projectile, accelerated to incredible speed by magnetic launchers, struck the alien cruiser with the force of a small nuclear weapon. The ship simply vanished in a cloud of debris. Reload and acquire next target, Santos commanded. We're going to show these aliens what happens when you threaten our home. Back in the main battle zone, something even more remarkable was happening. Human ships that had been damaged but not destroyed were refusing to retreat. Instead, they were using their remaining systems to provide targeting data and communication relays for other ships. Lieutenant Andy Foster, piloting a fighter with failing life support, used his last minutes of consciousness to transmit detailed analysis of Zephyrian weak points to every human vessel in range. This is Fighter 7 to all human ships, he gasped through his failing air supply. Their engines have vulnerable coupling joints at the rear of each nacelle. Hit them there and you can cripple ships 10 times your size. Make it count. The information spread through the human fleet in minutes. Soon, every civilian ship knew exactly where to aim their improvised weapons for maximum effect. Captain Sarah Davis received Foster's data aboard the Golden Gate and immediately shared it with her passengers. The luxury liner had been converted into a missile platform, with wealthy tourists working alongside the crew to load and aim their improvised weapons. Ladies and gentlemen, Davis announced over the ship's intercom, we now know how to hurt these invaders. Every shot we take from now on will be aimed at their weak spots. We may be outnumbered, but we're not outmatched. Admiral Kextar watched his fleet's casualties mount with increasing horror. In 3 hours of combat, he had lost over 100 ships to an enemy that should have been swept aside in minutes. Sir, request permission to withdraw and regroup, his second-in-command suggested. Absolutely not. We are the Zephyrian Empire. We do not retreat from primitives. But even as he spoke those words, Kextar was beginning to understand what Ambassador Velthos had tried to warn him about. These humans were not fighting a military campaign. They were fighting for their species' right to exist. Dr. Alan Price, working frantically aboard the civilian transport Digital Frontier, had been trying to crack the alien communication codes. When he finally succeeded, he made a decision that would haunt the Zephyrian Empire for generations. He began broadcasting the final messages of every human who had died in the battle, translated into Zephyrian, and transmitted directly to their fleet. The aliens heard the voices of ordinary people saying goodbye to their families, promising that their sacrifice would not be forgotten. Jake Morrison's last words echoed through every Zephyrian ship. Tell my nieces that Uncle Jake loved them enough to die for their future. The battle had been raging for 4 days, and Admiral Kextar no longer recognized the confident fleet he had brought to conquer humanity. His tactical display showed red warning symbols across half his remaining ships. Damage reports flooded in from every sector of his formation. Sir, we've lost 167 vessels, his tactical officer reported with a trembling voice. The humans have lost over 2,000 ships, but they continue to attack with the same intensity. As the first day, Kextar stared at the numbers in disbelief. By every rule of galactic warfare, the humans should have surrendered after losing half their fleet. Instead, they seem to fight harder with each passing hour. How many enemy vessels remain operational? He asked. Approximately 800, sir. But sir, there's something else. Our intelligence division reports that more human ships are arriving from the outer colonies. They're coming from mining operations, research stations, even passenger transports that have diverted from other star systems. The Admiral's 4 eyes focused on the tactical display where new blue contacts were indeed appearing at the edge of sensor range. More humans were coming to join a battle they could not possibly win. On the human side, Admiral Patricia Hayes stood in what remained of Luna Station's command center. Half the station had been destroyed by alien weapons, but the surviving sections continued to coordinate the defense of Earth. Ma'am, we're receiving a transmission from the cargo vessel Steady Progress, Lieutenant Ryan Cole reported. Captain Dan Murphy says he's carrying industrial equipment from the Jupiter colonies and wants to know where he can do the most damage. Hayes looked at her tactical display. The Steady Progress was a massive freight hauler designed to carry mining machinery between the outer planets. In the hands of a determined human captain, it would become another weapon in humanity's desperate arsenal. Tell Captain Murphy to coordinate with Colonel Santos on Mars. She'll know how to put his cargo to good use. Throughout the solar system, the pattern repeated endlessly. Dr. Rebecca Foster arrived from the research station at Europa, her ship loaded with experimental explosives that her team had been developing for asteroid mining. Captain Tony Williams diverted his passenger liner from the Saturn run, volunteering his ship and 300 civilian passengers for combat duty. Each new arrival brought the same message. They had heard about the invasion, and they had come to help defend their species' home. Colonel Maria Santos had transformed Mars into a fortress that would have impressed military engineers throughout the galaxy. Her orbital platforms no longer just fired kinetic projectiles. Working with arriving civilian engineers, she had converted the entire planetary defense grid into a massive weapons factory. Captain Murphy, this is Colonel Santos, she transmitted, to the approaching cargo vessel. What's your manifest? Magnetic rail systems, industrial fusion reactors, and about 50 tons of rare earth metals, Murphy replied. How can we help? Santos smiled grimly. Dock at Platform 7. We're building something that should get the aliens' attention. What they built was a weapon that existed nowhere in Zephyrian military doctrine. Using Murphy's cargo and the combined expertise of a dozen civilian engineers, Santos created a magnetic accelerator that could launch projectiles at nearly 10% of light speed. The first shot from Santos's new weapon struck a Zephyrian battleship from 4 million kilometers away. The impact vaporized the entire vessel instantly, sending shockwaves through the alien fleet. Target destroyed, Santos's gunner reported with satisfaction. Reloading for second shot. No, Santos said, studying her tactical display. I have a better idea. Load a spread of smaller projectiles. Let's see how many ships we can hit with one shot. Admiral Kextar watched the destruction of his battleship with growing horror. The humans had somehow developed weapons that matched his fleet's most advanced technology, built from primitive materials by civilians who had never seen a real war. Sir, damage assessment shows the weapon that destroyed Battleship 7 used kinetic acceleration beyond our current capabilities, his science officer reported. How did primitives develop such technology? They didn't develop it, Kextar realized with growing dread. They improvised it. They're taking their industrial equipment and turning it into weapons we've never seen before. This was exactly what Ambassador Velthos had tried to warn him about. Humans didn't fight with established military doctrine. They invented new ways to kill their enemies using whatever materials they could find. In space near Earth, Commander Lisa Chen was coordinating the largest improvised fleet in galactic history. Her battleship Defiance had become the command center for over 300 civilian vessels, each one crewed by volunteers who had never expected to fight for their species' survival. All ships, this is Commander Chen. We've received new intelligence on enemy weak points. Their command ships have exposed communication arrays on their upper hulls. If we can destroy those arrays, we can blind their fleet coordination. The response came from dozens of civilian captains. Captain Ellen Wright of the research vessel Deep Explorer spoke for all of them. Commander, my ship carries atmospheric entry probes designed to penetrate planetary surfaces. If I can get close enough to their command ship, those probes should punch right through their communication array. Captain Wright, that's a suicide mission. Their command ship is protected by the entire enemy fleet. Ma'am, I've got grandchildren on Earth. If dying means they get to grow up free, that's not suicide. That's the best trade I'll ever make. Chen felt tears in her eyes as she gave permission for the attack. Captain Wright's ship accelerated toward the heart of the Zephyrian formation, followed by a dozen other civilian vessels providing covering fire. Dr. Wright's atmospheric probes, designed to study planetary geology, proved remarkably effective at destroying alien communication equipment. Her ship was destroyed by enemy fire, but not before her probes had blinded 3 Zephyrian command vessels. The loss of coordination began to show immediately. Without their communication arrays, the alien ships started making tactical errors, firing on positions where human ships had been instead of where they were now. But the moment that truly changed the course of the battle came from an unexpected source. Dr. Alan Price, still working frantically aboard the Digital Frontier, had been monitoring Zephyrian communications since the battle began. Commander Chen, this is Dr. Price aboard Digital Frontier. I've been analyzing enemy communications and I think I've found something important. Go ahead, Doctor. The aliens are getting demoralized. Their internal communications show increasing requests for withdrawal orders. Ma'am, I don't think they expected us to fight this hard or this long. Chen studied her tactical display. The human fleet was in ruins, with less than 600 ships still operational. But the alien fleet had suffered proportionally worse losses, and their remaining ships were showing signs of hesitation in their attack patterns. Doctor, can you intercept their command frequencies? Already working on it, ma'am. But I have a better idea. What if we sent them a message they'll never forget? Price had been recording everything during the 4-day battle. The voices of every human who had died, the final transmissions from ships as they made their last attacks, the conversations between civilians as they volunteered for missions they knew would kill them. He compiled all of it into a single transmission and broadcast it on every Zephyrian frequency simultaneously. The alien fleet suddenly heard the voices of an entire species that had decided their children's freedom was worth any price. Jake Morrison's final words echoed through their ships. Nobody threatens our family and gets away with it. Dr. Kevin Walsh's last transmission followed. This is what survival looks like. Captain Ellen writes goodbye to her grandchildren. Grandma loves you enough to die for your future. But Price saved the most powerful message for last. It was Admiral Patricia Hayes, speaking to the entire human fleet during the darkest moment of the battle. To every human ship in this system, This is Admiral Hayes. I know you're scared. I know this seems hopeless. But I want you to remember why we're here. We're not fighting for territory or resources or political advantage. We're fighting for the right of our children to grow up free. We're fighting so that humanity can choose its own destiny among the stars. And if we have to die for that right, then we die knowing that our sacrifice has meaning. The transmission continued with the voices of ordinary people who had become extraordinary through their willingness to sacrifice everything for their species' survival. For the Zephyrian soldiers, listening to these messages was like hearing the voices of the dead demanding justice. They had conquered dozens of species, but they had never faced an enemy that treated death as an acceptable price for defiance. Admiral Kextar stood on his bridge, listening to the human voices, and finally understood what Ambassador Velthos had tried to tell him. These weren't soldiers following orders. These were parents and grandparents, teachers and workers, all united by a single terrifying purpose: protecting their families from extinction. "Sir, we're receiving casualty reports from all sectors," his tactical officer said quietly. "Total losses now exceed 200 ships. Our remaining forces are requesting permission to withdraw and regroup." On the 5th day of battle, Admiral Kextar made a decision that no Zephyrian commander had ever made in 3 centuries of conquest. Standing on the bridge of his damaged flagship, surrounded by casualty reports and demoralization warnings from across his fleet, he gave the order that would change galactic history. "All ships, this is Admiral Kextar. Begin withdrawal procedures immediately. We are leaving this system." The silence on the communication channels was complete. His officers stared at him with expressions of disbelief and confusion. The Zephyrian Empire had never retreated from a battle, especially not against a primitive species. "Sir," his tactical officer said carefully, "are you certain of this order? Our remaining forces still outnumber the enemy." Kextar looked at his tactical display where less than 200 red symbols represented what remained of his once mighty fleet. Around them, nearly 400 blue contacts continued their relentless attacks with the same fury they had shown on the first day. "Numbers are meaningless against an enemy that has already decided death is acceptable," he replied quietly. "We came here to conquer a species. Instead, we found something that cannot be conquered." The withdrawal order spread through the Zephyrian fleet with mixed reactions. Some ships obeyed immediately, grateful for permission to escape the nightmare of fighting humans. Others hesitated, unwilling to accept that their superior technology and centuries of military experience had failed against primitive opponents. Admiral Patricia Hayes received the news of the alien withdrawal while standing in the ruins of Luna Station's command center. Half her staff was dead, her fleet was reduced to scattered survivors, and Earth itself bore the scars of 5 days of orbital bombardment. "Ma'am, our sensors confirm it," Lieutenant Ryan Cole reported with exhaustion and disbelief in his voice. "The alien fleet is breaking off their attack and moving toward the outer system." Hayes closed her eyes for a moment, hardly daring to believe the words. When she opened them, she saw her surviving officers looking at her with expressions of wonder and pride. "Send a message to all human vessels," she ordered. "The enemy is retreating. Maintain defensive positions but do not pursue. We've paid enough in blood for this victory." Throughout the solar system, the news spread with the speed of light. On Mars, Colonel Maria Santos received the transmission while preparing another volley from her improvised superweapons. She looked at her crew of civilian volunteers, miners, and engineers who had spent 5 days turning their planet into a fortress. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced over the platform's communication system, "the aliens are running away. We won." The celebration that followed was quiet and respectful. Too many friends had died in the past 5 days for anyone to feel triumphant. But there was something else in the air, something that would define humanity's place in the galaxy for generations to come. They had been tested by the strongest military force in known space, and they had not broken. Captain Dan Murphy, still aboard his converted cargo vessel near Mars, spoke for countless survivors when he transmitted to the fleet. "We didn't win because we were stronger or smarter. We won because when someone threatens to destroy everything you love, you discover you're capable of anything." Dr. Alan Price, exhausted from days of monitoring alien communications, intercepted the final Zephyrian military reports as their fleet prepared to leave the system. What he heard would become the foundation of humanity's reputation throughout the galaxy. "This is Admiral Kextar to Zephyrian High Command," the transmission began. "Mission failure confirmed. Recommend immediate reclassification of human species. Threat level. These are not primitive opponents, they are something we have never encountered before." The report continued with details that Price carefully recorded. Human military doctrine appears to be based on total species survival, rather than territorial defense. Conventional conquest appears impossible. Civilian population demonstrates willingness to sacrifice individual lives for collective survival at rates exceeding any known species. But the words that would echo through galactic history came at the end of Kextar's report. "High Command, I respectfully request that the Sol system be declared permanently off-limits to Imperial expansion. We came expecting to fight soldiers. Instead, we found parents willing to die so their children could breathe free air. You cannot defeat an enemy who has already accepted death as the price of victory." Ambassador Velthos, monitoring communications, from his quarters on the Galactic Council station, heard Admiral Kextar's words with grim satisfaction. He had tried to warn them, but the Zephyrian Empire had been too proud to listen. He immediately sent a message to every species in the galactic community. "The Zephyrian Empire has retreated from the Sol system. The humans have achieved something unprecedented in recorded galactic warfare. They have forced a superior enemy to withdraw through sheer determination and willingness to sacrifice." The message continued with a warning that would shape interspecies relations for centuries. Any species considering aggressive action against humanity should study these battle records carefully. Humans do not fight wars in the traditional sense. They fight for survival, and a species fighting for survival follows no rules except victory or extinction. On Earth, the survivors began the long process of counting their losses and rebuilding their shattered world. The casualty reports were staggering. Over 2,000 ships destroyed, including hundreds of civilian vessels that had been converted to weapons. Tens of thousands of humans had died in 5 days of desperate fighting. But they had survived as a free species, and that knowledge changed everything. Commander Lisa Chen, now the senior military officer in the inner system after Admiral Hayes, was injured in the final day of fighting, addressed the surviving fleet with words that would be carved into monuments throughout human space. "To every human who fought in this battle, to every family that lost someone defending our freedom, to every child who will grow up free because of what happened here, remember this. We were tested by the strongest force in the galaxy, and we did not break. We bent, we bled, we lost friends and family, but we did not break." Dr. Rebecca Foster, who had arrived from Europa just in time to participate in the final day of fighting, began compiling records of every human who had died in the battle. Her research vessel's computers held the names, faces, and final words of thousands of ordinary people who had become heroes. Their sacrifice must be remembered, she told anyone who would listen. Jake Morrison was a cargo pilot who turned his ship into a weapon. Lisa Park was a navigator who died ramming an alien destroyer. Dr. Kevin Walsh was a biologist who proved that humans fight like forces of nature when threatened with extinction. The list went on and on. Teachers who had died protecting their students' future. Farmers who had died defending their world's soil. Engineers who had died building weapons from mining equipment. Grandparents who had died so their grandchildren could choose their own destiny among the stars. 6 months later, when the galactic community met to discuss the implications of humanity's victory, Ambassador Velthos addressed the council with words that would define humanity's reputation for generations. "Honored representatives, we have witnessed something unprecedented in galactic history. A primitive species has forced an advanced military empire to retreat through sheer determination and willingness to sacrifice. The humans have proven that superior technology and numbers mean nothing against an enemy that refuses to be conquered." He paused and looked around the chamber where representatives from dozens of species listened in silence. "But more importantly, they have shown us something about the nature of survival itself. When the Zephyrian Empire threatened to destroy their species, the humans did not respond with panic or desperation. They responded with unity and determination. Every human, from soldiers to civilians, from children to elderly, understood that their individual survival mattered less than their species' freedom. The council chamber remained silent as Velthos delivered his final warning. Any species that considers aggressive action against humanity should understand what they will face. You will not be fighting an army or a government or even a planet. You will be fighting every human parent who believes their children deserve to grow up free. You will be fighting every human grandparent who wants their descendants to choose their own path among the stars. You will be fighting an entire species that has already decided some things are worth dying for. Years later, when other alien species encountered humanity in peaceful exploration and trade, they would remember the Battle of Sol. They would remember that humans had faced extinction and chosen to fight rather than surrender. Captain Elena Morrison, daughter of the late Jake Morrison, would join the newly formed Galactic Peace Corps carrying her father's words as humanity's gift to the galaxy. We fought not because we loved war, but because we loved peace enough to die for it. The Zephyrian Empire never expanded again. Admiral Kextar spent his remaining years writing military doctrine based on a simple principle: never fight an enemy that treats survival as more important than victory.